Members of the jury, I'd like you to imagine a scenario with me. Let's say one summer day you decide to go outside and head for a leisurely walk through your neighborhood. A few hours later, you would return to discover your face has gotten a little sunburned. Now, before you left, you saw the sun shining brightly in the sky, and you glanced down at the sunscreen on your counter. And yet, you decided to venture outside anyway, thinking, I don't need the sunscreen. And when you returned from your walk, likely a little perturbed from a minor skin irritation, who do you blame? You blame the sun. Now, that's not how it works, is it? Any reasonable person would look up at the sun on a sunny day like that and know that if you had a way to prevent a sunburn, you would utilize it. And that reasonable care is exactly why we find ourselves here in this courtroom today. Because of one individual's development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and their allegations that such a disease was caused by the direct actions of Lush Fertilizers Incorporated. While it is a tragedy that the plaintiff remains affected by this disease, Lush Fertilizers bears no culpability for the charges at hand. The defense has proven through scientific study, objective fact, and at times even the plaintiff's own testimony, that the condition the plaintiff finds themselves in today is a result of the plaintiff's own negligence and ineptitude, rather than the actions of a reputable company. Now, the plaintiff has tried to turn you to jury instruction 2, in which all must be found true to convict in favor of the plaintiff, where it states that the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating an unreasonable risk of harm to persons who might reasonably be expected to use the product in the manner that the defendant might have reasonably expected. In order to prove this purported negligence, the plaintiff must prove that if a manufacturer of a product knows or in the exercise of reasonable care should know that 1, the use of the product may be harmful or injurious to a user, and 2, that the risk of harm or injury is not obvious to the reasonable user, then the manufacturer did not use reasonable care to warn the user of the risk of harm or injury if a reasonably careful person would under the same or similar circumstances. Let me remind you what you've heard. You've heard from Dr. Devin Williams, a renowned toxicologist with decades of experience who was directly involved in the research and development of Drufo at Lush Fertilizers, and demonstrated insider knowledge that showed no increased risk of cancer from Drufo exposure. None. Now, let's talk about what you heard from the plaintiff. The plaintiff brought to you a so-called expert witness and tried to convince you that research that has not been peer-reviewed on toxicology by an individual who is not a toxicologist proves that Drufo causes cancer by a person who is also not a medical doctor and has never even stepped foot in a medical school. Furthermore, let me remind you of jury instruction number 8. The negligence of the plaintiff is proven if the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, failed to do something that reasonably careful people would do under the same or similar circumstances to protect themselves from the claimed danger created by the product. If you find this true, you must find in favor of the defendant. In the plaintiff's own testimony, she describes bypassing common sense safety precautions such as wearing protective clothing that covers exposed skin and the use of a respirator at times, guidance her own employer gave to her, ignoring it because it was too hot outside. Now, that was a choice she was free to make, but a choice she made knowing the risks. Now, we all make potentially risky choices every day, whether that is driving a little faster to get to work on time, or the fact that many still choose to smoke, knowing it causes cancer. They know the risks, and they've made their decisions. And the plaintiff knew the risks. When she worked with Drufo, the product had a warning label on it, warning her of the risks of not wearing protective clothing. Her boss told her to do the exact same thing. She knew there was a risk to not wearing protective gear, but she decided to take that risk. Lush Fertilizers manufactures a safe product when used properly. A safe product responsible for an agricultural revolution to the benefit of those all over the world, and a safe product responsible for massively reducing the environmental impacts of fertilizers. Don't let one individual's lack of care for safety as a teenager, working in an inherently unsafe industry, tarnish the reputation of a proven safe and effective product. At the end of today's trial, enter the deliberation room. Look at the evidence which has been presented. Recall the testimony that you have heard. Find Lush Fertilizers Incorporated not liable, and end this dubious attempt to harness the injury of one to extract monetary gain from a party not responsible for the condition of the plaintiff.